It's the Progress Pod, a production of the Franklin County Coalition for Progress. I'm Pete Mazzoni with Jeremy Kate, and we're happy to welcome back one of our favorite guests, Ann Hull from the Franklin County Historical Society. Bring us up to speed on what's new and what's definitely old in our town. Welcome back, Ann.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here. Now, you're here to talk about the environmental project that's going on.
That's one of the things I'd like to
let's
talk
go ahead and get
a little
into
bit
that.
About. We've discovered over the years that we have to protect artifacts and archives, that people trust us to take care of their old things. They donate all these wonderful things to us, and they expect us to care for them and to protect them. And so we've been working very hard on this environmental project, which is divided into 4 phases. We're obviously going to have to start launching a capital campaign fairly soon. But we have raised enough money through grants and donors and bequests that we can start on phase 1, and that will be in the next month. And it shouldn't take too long to get that accomplished.
Okay.
Then we'd have 3 more phases. The total project is for climate control in the building is $700,000. And we'd like to add another $300,000 for an exterior elevator that doesn't touch anything within the building, historically speaking. As I said, we've already raised a portion to do phase 1, and that will be to protect archives, photographs, textiles in the 1818 building.
That's the date it was built, correct?
That's the early part. Yeah, we had the other part of the jail was built in 1880.
Okay.
So we're working on the front part, the front portion first, to protect as much as we can. We do have a lot of wonderful things, particularly in the past 2 years. I might mention a few things.
Yeah,
that
please
we've
do.
gotten.
I'd love to know some of the artifacts you have that need this protection.
Well, a couple things we've had for a long time, and one is the Certificate of Cincinnati, which is it is an organization that was started by the officers from the American Revolution, because it was named after Cincinnatus, a Roman who went off to war when it was necessary, but came back to his farm or his home, when he wasn't fighting. So it's a citizen soldier.
Right.
And so, because that's what happened after the American Revolution. And the first person was George Washington, of course. And the certificate we have is of James Chambers, who is the son of the founder.
Of Benjamin Chambers?
Yeah. And it has Washington's signature on it.
Oh, wow.
And, it has started to deteriorate, and we've had a lot of work done on it to protect it. So now we feel that's in good shape. We have another item that I need to have restored, and that is the flag that was hanging outside the Mansion House on the Diamond in 1864 when Chambersburg was burned. It's the only flag I know, of that. It's exceptional. It's in very bad shape, and I'm fairly sure I can get a grant to restore it.
Okay.
It's a 35-star flag.
Oh, that's
and
great.
It was actually taken down the morning Chambersburg was burned, and it was taken to the Brand Hotel, which was on the corner of Queen and 2nd Street, where the stone building is now that Shuck has, I think, for administration offices. At that time, there was a 3-story hotel there called the Brand Hotel, and David Brand actually took down the flag that was on the square and took it to his hotel. Well, the family lived right beside that in a home on Queen Street, and Louisa Brand, his sister, actually wrapped that flag around her at the time and threatened any Confederate who came there.
What a
and
great
it worked.
Story. Yeah.
It worked. She had her pistol, and it worked.
Wow, she was wrapped in the flag with a pistol.
Yep.
What an image.
Yep, and the house was saved. And there weren't too many homes on Queen Street that were saved.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So what causes the deterioration, if I can ask?
Well, first of all, it's gone through over 150 years.
Sure, it's just old.
Is old, and I don't think it had been taken care of properly, and I think we need to do that now. That is going to be my legacy, taking care of these artifacts and these archives we have, so that we're saving the future by protecting the past, and that's kind of my logo. And I think it's probably over time. Maybe somebody had it on a windowsill and it was in the sun for a long period of time. I have had it either in the dark for a while, or I've had it on exhibit in a display case, which I've taken it down now. It's back in storage in the dark until I can get it restored, until I can get,
Where do you send these things to be restored?
To experts who know how to do that sort of thing. Are
they down in D.C. or
at this point? Well, I work with somebody out of Carlisle who does amazing work with the Smithsonian, with Williamsburg. Brian Howard is his name, and he has a wonderful business there. And he is able to restore anything that you have by either doing it himself or finding experts. He knows where to find the experts to take care of these things. And so that's one of my next projects, smaller projects, to get this flag, because I think that's very important to protect it. But we've gotten several things in the past couple of years, like Frank Feather. Do you know that name?
I do not.
He was a wood carver who was kind of like a tramp. He traveled by foot along what I guess would be the 81 corridor, but this is like over 100 years ago, like 1900. And he traveled along the corridor walking, and whenever he'd stop at a house, he'd say, for room or board, I'll whittle something for you out of wood. Okay. Well, there are collectors of his, especially his canes. And
that's cool.
And about a year ago, we had a donor from California bring in this a piece of wood, and I thought, I wonder if that's a Frank Feather carving. And sure enough, I asked one of the collectors in Chambersburg, and he came over and he said, "Oh yes, very definitely."
And the name's Frank Feather.
Yes.
What a great
name! He was like a tramp, and he would whittle things out of wood, and they are, people save these things today. Collectors save these things.
So he did walking sticks, and what else did he whittle?
Well, I don't know what all he does, but the piece we have is a wall rack, like you would put in the 1800s. You would have a rack within, like the foyer of your home, where you could place newspapers or the mail that came.
Sure.
It's that sort of thing, and that's what we have. That's one of the things we have. We've just come into ownership of a Daniel Ridgway Knight painting. He's very famous for landscapes and the peasant women he did. He lived in France most of his life, and some of those paintings go for like $200,000. Yeah. And what he was born here in Franklin County. In fact, he was born in the building that's known as the Sellers Funeral Home. At a young age, they realized how much talent he had.
We talked about him during the Burning of Chambersburg show. Right, because there was some you talked about.
Oh, him. I could have done that.
There was a story about him during the burning.
Yes, and there's the Washington County Fine Arts does have the Burning of Chambersburg. It's a very large portrait, but they have it under temperature control.
So he did that painting.
He did that paint, and he was here during the burning.
Yeah.
Because he helped some people. He helped Mrs. McClure walk to Shippensburg.
Right.
After New Orleans was. Yeah. But he did some paintings. One is in Texas, and it shows the scene from West King Street. I have not been able to get my hands on that one yet. But the one we do have is also a scene from the bridge on West King looking south, so that you could actually see the steeple of Zion Church in the background. That's how we know. And it needs some work done on it. And I have someone over in Cashtown, around Ortana, working on it, who's very good with paintings. Yeah.
So how do these people find you? I mean, this has got to be kind of an interesting process, where these collectors or whatever.
Well, I mean, we're fairly well known. Franklin County Historical Society, has been in existence since 1898. And we're fairly well known, over the country. And people realize that, they might live in California or Washington or whatever, and they are cleaning out their attics and they realize, oh, well, here's a document from Franklin, here's a deed from Franklin County, or I know this came from whatever family in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, or from Greencastle or Mercersburg. And so they find us on the web. We have a new website now. They find us on the web, and we get calls all the time.
So
I
your
had
email
a call
inbox.
last week from a woman in North Carolina whose grandmother made she was a Chambers, and she made a quilt for her. Well, she's sending it to me. It should be coming in the mail any day now, along with documentation and some letters that went back and forth in this Chambers family. So it's that kind of thing that I get really excited about, and I want to make sure that these are saved for the future. So that's why
I gotta throw this in. I'm from Kansas City, and I have a friend from my high school in Kansas City whose last name is Chambers, and she has some kind of familial connection to the Chambers family in Chambersburg.
Wow.
Thought that was pretty random.
I wonder if she has anything that might have been carried off to, because a
could.
good many of the Chambers left the area.
Okay.
James, the oldest son,
Okay, well,
his
some of them
family
ended up in
kind
the
of
Midwest.
moved west.
Yeah.
So she might have something that we would be interested in.
So will Phase 1 take care of a lot of these artifacts?
Phase 1 will take care of a portion of them. We have 3 other phases which we'll have to raise funds for. We'd like to have temperature control in the main portion of the building, the museum, because we have loads of people who come here every year. I think we had maybe 3,000 to 4,000 people last year.
Wow.
And that doesn't include things that we do like the haunted jail. We had over 2,300 people come to that.
Oh, that's great.
So we have a tremendous amount of people.
Yeah, I did the tour with my daughter a couple years ago, and there was a family from Mississippi that left Gettysburg and came here specifically to do the old jail tour. And for anyone who hasn't done it, it's a lot of fun. It's very interesting, a little morbid.
Oh,
but,
do you
interesting.
think? You think because of
the whole hanging thing,
Oh, and the dungeon.
Yeah.
The kids love the dungeon.
I think I like the medical exhibit that you have there.
Oh, people love the
cool.
apothecary and all those wonderful tools that doctors used to use. And yes. So anyway, so we're doing this in 4 phases of the project. The second phase will probably be the west cell block on the first and second levels, which have a great many artifacts in too. And then the third level of that area has newspapers from 1800. Franklin Repository, Valley Spirit, Public Opinion, which we don't have, we have some on microfilm, but not all.
So there were 3 newspapers just in Chambersburg.
There were a lot more than that.
How many were there?
They evolved into, from 1800 they evolved into many other ones. One would buy out another one. They became, like Democratic something or other, or another. I can't even think of the other. But there were many. There could have been 8 or 10 that actually evolved into. The Franklin Repository was huge. In the 1800s. Of course, then the Public Opinion, which is still in existence. The Valley...
Just barely.
I know.
Unfortunately.
Well, yes, I know. So, and then I guess the final phase will be to get air conditioning in the entire museum.
Including the basement?
No, the dungeon is not included, but the dungeon stays rather cool all the time.
Right. Yeah.
Even in the summer. In fact, I feel sorry for those poor criminals who were down there in over 100 years ago, because in the winter it's so cold down there you can see your breath. I don't know how anyone survived down there. I really don't.
Yeah. On another topic, what drove the local economy around the time the old jail went up?
You mean 1818?
Yeah.
I think they had lots of little shops on the main street where people would they would have their shops on the first level and live on the second level. You know, like silversmiths, blacksmiths. My ancestor, who came here originally, had a tannery, and it was right where the Coyle Library is today. And that person married another tanner who was just right up the street. You know, and they married, so tannery was a big business. There are a lot of inns here, what were known, you know, as inns. But there were also small businesses. I was trying to think of the name of the clock, and I can't. There are very few clocks left by this local man who was a silversmith as well.
Chambersburg was a pretty wealthy community in those early days, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
What,
you know,
what was behind that? Why was that?
I think because of small industry. I don't know that it was. I mean, there were a lot of what they call plantations or farms. There were a lot of plantations, but I think there were small industries just within the town itself. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was going to mention something else about other businesses that were, you know, like dry goods stores. You know, I mean, and I guess farmers would bring in their products.
Sure.
Too. Yeah.
Now, I noticed on the website something I'd never heard of, the Welsh Run Area. Mm-hmm. What is that?
Well, it was settled by people from
Wales.
Okay. Right. There's a Conococheag Institute there right now, which has developed that site. I think they have an old cabin from that early time period. The names are Davis, and there's another name, but they were from Wales.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you know why they chose here? What was particularly attractive about Chambersburg?
Well, you mean the county, because it was not Chambersburg.
Right, sorry.
The county, because when they came here, it was probably Cumberland County. Okay. Or maybe a little before that. You know, we became Cumberland County in 1750 until 1784, and then we became Franklin County. Prior to 1750, we were Lancaster County. And so there were settlers here in the 1730s.
But mostly German, right?
Yes, mostly German, but there are some Welsh who came like shortly after that. Scots-Irish came early.
Okay.
Benjamin Chambers there as an example. And some of the settlements, like the Conococheag settlements, consisted mainly of Germans, and that was like in the Greencastle area, Shady Grove area.
Mm-hmm. What was driving them out of Germany? Was it religious persecution?
Yeah. Well, and William Penn said, "Come to Pennsylvania. There's all this land."
So that was the pure incentive, free land, or
yes,
what was
free
it?
land and religious freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Religious freedom, yes.
Interesting.
Yes. I had been working on my Huguenot line. I have a little bit of Huguenot.
Now that's French.
I know. And I was working on that line and discovered that, you know, the reason that there were Huguenots was because France was a Catholic country, and, you know, heads were lopped off for any Protestant. And so they moved anywhere, Germany, England, Switzerland, whatever, before they came to America. And they came, I think, mostly up in New York, Long Island area, and to Canada. And that was for religious freedom. That was to save themselves.
Right. So it's almost like Martin Luther kind of set off an immigration wave.
It is.
Which
yes.
I'd never thought of that before.
Yeah.
Where these people said, "No, I'm a Protestant," but they realized they were in mortal danger.
They were.
If they hung around.
Right.
Now, you offer genealogy services through the Historical Society.
We have a huge library.
Tell us about that library. What could we learn, or what could we find out?
We base it mainly on Franklin County families. So we have published and non-published books and manuscripts, family files. We have census records, tax records, cemetery records, obituaries, church records where we have baptisms, marriages. We're trying to digitize a good bit of this.
Sure, you need to do that.
But, we need volunteers to do that. And we need volunteers for docents. Well, I'm putting in a plug for volunteers. So, and I do a lot of research on families, people who are looking for, those ancestors and who they married, because they're working on their lines and they want to know where they came from.
Who are some of the other founding families besides the Chambers?
Within Chambersburg, or you
the
mean
county.
within the county?
Yeah.
Let's see if I can think. Allison's from Greencastle.
Okay.
Let me think if I can think of any other ones offhand. I do so much research, and it's not particularly people who actually came here first. It might be people who came here in 1790, for instance. I was working on a line the other week, and I was trying to find a woman who came here in 1749. And that was really tough.
So how do you start that?
I will say, what do you know?
Sure.
What do you know first? And then work backwards from them.
Uh-huh.
And that's how I do. I do a lot of DAR applications, and that's how I do it.
To the American Revolution.
Yes, and that's how I do it. I work backwards from this, and this person might say, "Oh, my ancestor's name was Dixon. Do you have any Dixons here?" And of course, I'll go to the family file and I'll look and if they give me some time frame, that obviously helps too.
Right.
Because the first census records were in 1790. So then, you can kind of trace. You can't see everybody's names until 1850, but you can kind of trace a line from 1790. We do have earlier tax records than that. We have tax records from 1750, as early as 1750, which is Cumberland County. So, I can go back and say, oh, well, I found this man named John Dixon or whatever. It's spelled Dixon. Is that the way you spell the name now or whatever? So we just have a lot of historical records on the shelf. Mm-hmm. We also have a room that's devoted to other counties in Pennsylvania, so that we have records on Fayette County, Westmoreland County, Indiana County. We have a great many records.
Now, before we got going on the show, you mentioned the old courthouse where Frederick Douglass spoke.
Not the courthouse, but
courthouse.
The annex. Or,
it was
the trust
I think it was
building.
called the Franklin House at the time.
Okay.
This is before the burning in 1864. And it was like a 2 to 3 story building.
So it's not the building that's being demolished right now, but it was
was
on that site?
It was on that site.
Okay.
And it was an opera house. I guess there were some offices in it. And I know that there must have been some sort of an auditorium because Frederick Douglass did speak from there when he was in town.
Wow.
In the summer of 1859. Mm-hmm.
Oh,
but,
interesting. Just before the Civil War.
Oh, he was here because John Brown asked him to come. John Brown.
They met just down here at Southgate.
Very close by here.
Yeah.
They met at an old quarry.
Is there any record of what Douglas thought of John Brown? Because John Brown
He thought he was crazy,
Yeah,
right?
he was a crazy dude. A crazy, murderous dude.
Okay. I think they had different methods. John Brown was very...
well, he tried to save him from himself, didn't he, here in Chambersburg?
The thing is...
Frederick Douglass did, John Brown?
Yeah, Frederick Douglass tried to say... I mean, he wanted to work passively. John Brown couldn't wait. He was getting older. He couldn't... Yeah. And he was very notorious because... he was wanted for murder in Kansas.
In Kansas,
yeah, I was just going
right.
to say, we brought it back to Kansas. He was already busy killing.
Yeah.
So by the time he got here, he was loaded for bear. So Douglas tried to talk him down off the ledge?
When he arrived in Chambersburg, no one knew him because he had changed completely. He had white hair and he had a white beard. No one knew who he was. He was charged with murder. So... so he had changed completely, and he went by the name Isaac Smith. And he had sent his son earlier to scout out safe houses in south central Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
And
staging for Harper's Ferry.
Yeah, mm-hmm. And because there were abolitionists living here in the county, and I don't know that was well known at the time. It was kind of a secretive thing. I know that in the 1850s, they brought in a cashier to take over the Bank of Chambersburg, which is where the Visitors Bureau is today. This is the original building. And they brought a man in by the name of James Leslie to take over the bank because there were, financial problems there. And he came from Philadelphia, and he was a well-known abolitionist, and he helped fugitives from probably a room or a building behind the bank. He helped them move north. And he was well-known, and he only stayed in Chambersburg long enough to put the bank back into shape. And then he went back to Philadelphia.
Was being an abolitionist controversial at that time?
I think it was kept hidden. I mean, it was like, let's just not talk about it.
Oh,
let's just not talk about it.
Now, is that because at the time the Fugitive Slave Act and Southerners could be
it was
kind of
dangerous. It was
they come after their property, and if they knew you were assisting slaves, could they?
I think it was kept hidden. I really do. I think.
Speaking of the old jail, you have some interesting parts of the basement down there where.
Now that's tradition. That's tradition says that.
Okay.
I can't
so
document.
It's not
I
confirmed.
cannot document that there were fugitive slaves in that in the dungeon.
Spoken like a true historian.
Well, I mean, really.
Bob, there's no
I
documentation.
mean, look at this. Look at this Georgian building. If you were a runaway slave, would you feel free to go into
to the
that
jail?
building? I mean,
It's not where I'd
seriously.
be headed. No.
No. They'd traveled at night. They moved during, they traveled at night and slept during the day. I mean, I do know, about how they came, the route they came from in Maryland, particularly through Waynesboro to Quincy to Greenwood, north to Adams County.
Now, were there sympathizers to the Southern cause in Chambersburg who would be working actively to...
Yes, there were, but like I said, it was kept hidden. And the newspapers were, the Franklin Repository was a northern newspaper. The Valley Spirit was a southern newspaper. And some of the language used in that...
strong.
It was very strong language like you would hear today.
That's funny you bring that up, that people think all this heated rhetoric is somehow new.
It's not.
It's not at all.
It's not.
It's making a comeback.
Yeah, we've been doing this a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I want to move on to another topic I saw on the website. I'm going to mispronounce this. Kittatinny? Help me.
Kittatinny.
Kittatinny. Tell us about that. I was unfamiliar with the term.
Well, it's an Indian term for endless mountain, and that's what the original Historical Society was named when this group of gentlemen formed the society in 1898. I don't think a woman was allowed to join until 1956. But the wives of the men were expected to play hostess.
Okay.
Because they met in homes. They met in different homes of the members. And they would present papers on local history. So we have all those papers. We have them for today, that we can use for genealogy requests today. Great history.
And the Indians that were here, or where they derived that name, do you know much about them?
No, I don't know a lot about which tribes. I've read different tribes were here. Some of them were just traveling through, like it was maybe hunting ground. Okay. I do know, and I guess I shouldn't. There was a cemetery within the borough limits of Chambersburg, where there is an Indian cemetery.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, today.
Now, I do know you have a program on suffrage coming up. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I'm going to be the monthly speaker at our meeting. It's the fourth Thursday in March, and I'm going to talk about the suffragette movement, where I think I'm starting it at the national level with Abigail Adams, and I'm moving it down to Franklin County and its local connection, because there is a large connection.
And her name is Lavinia.
That was one of them.
Yeah, Lavinia is one of them, but it also, there was
look through our archives for more on that.
Satellite Society at Wilson College, and the controversy about the Old Home Week in 1914. There was a tremendous controversy whether we should accept the suffragettes or not. And finally, they were allowed to march in a parade. And so, and there was what's known as the Justice Bell that would not be clanged until women got the vote. But it traveled through here. Traveled through the county. It traveled through Mercersburg. I have a picture of it traveling through Mercersburg. And so it's going to be at Grove Library on the fourth Thursday of the month. I'm not sure of the date. It's always the fourth Thursday of the month at 2:00 at Grove Library.
Okay, that would be.
And Lavinia will be included in that.
If people want to donate to help the Historical Society, how can they do that?
We would appreciate that. Or they can make donations to the Historical Society, at 175 East King Street. If they want to make a particular donation to something that has to do with them in memory of somebody in their family, we would appreciate that. We do get some bequests. We've gotten some bequests recently.
And you have a new website, so what's that address?
We have a wonderful website. It's franklinhistorical.org.
Okay.
Cool. And we've had so much response from that, it's unbelievable.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
Oh, it's unbelievable. Really pleased with it. And the way it's moving along and how we're able to manipulate things much better now than it had been.
Sure. And you're also taking volunteers as docents or tour guides?
We are. We really need docents, especially for the summer, when we'll be opening in May from Tuesday through Saturday, and we could really use docents. It's not hard. It's just you need to enjoy being with people, talking, sure. Being outgoing. We can teach you the rest. I mean, there are things to learn, but then you have to pick and choose. You look at your patrons who come in, and if they're not interested in that railroad, then you move on and you talk about something else that they might be interested in.
Pete, I think you would make a good docent.
I agree. Why don't you
get over there?
Come over.
I'm under pressure here.
Yeah.
What are people most interested in, do you find? Is there an area of the
Civil War? We have the Civil War Gallery. They're very interested in that. Mm-hmm.
What do you think drives the fascination with the Civil War? Because
Gettysburg
is always busy, and the people that I did the tour with, like I mentioned, they just lined it up. Gettysburg, then Chambersburg. It's kind of an unending fascination with this moment in history.
More so than any other. More so than the French and Indian period. More so than the Revolution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should probably be a little more interested in the Revolutionary War since it got us here, but there you go.
I know, that's just the way it is. People will come over the mountain from Gettysburg. They'll do the tour, they'll go to the visitor center, and they'll look on TripAdvisor or whatever and find out what else there is to do. Oh, over the mountain, we have the old jail. People come. This is a destination. It has become a destination. We're really happy about that.
That's great. Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show again, Ann.
Thank you for having me.
Always an enlightening conversation. One more time, the whittler's name.
Frank Feather.
Frank Feather. I think that's the one to look up. The tramp who whittled. So thanks for coming on. And again, the URL is, what is the website URL?
franklinhistorical.org.
Brand new website. Check it out. Come down, do the tour, volunteer, donate. Let's keep this going. And thanks again, Ann.
Thank you.
Thank you.